So there's a lot to unpack here, and I want to do it as comprehensively, but also as concisely as I possibly can, and really kind of spell it out to you guys so that it makes sense. So I'm not going to read the entire amendment to you. You can go and read the amendment from top to bottom yourself. Link is in the description box down below. What I want to do is I want to explain what effect the amendment has, because there's a bunch of legal jargon in there, for lack of a better term, that can be quite confusing, to be completely honest with you guys. So this declaration and the amendment to the Therapeutic Goods Act has the effect of automatically classifying certain sports supplements as therapeutic goods. So the first part of understanding this declaration and the amendment to the Therapeutic Goods Act is understanding exactly what sports supplements are captured by this declaration. So there's a few different requirements that have to be met for a sports supplement to be a therapeutic good, or to be considered a therapeutic good under this declaration and under these amendments. So the requirements are, first and foremost, that a product has to be advertised as a sports supplement effectively. And the declaration goes into details about the sorts of claims that will automatically qualify it as it being advertised as a sports supplement. Things like gaining muscle, increasing mental focus, regulating, modifying hormone levels. There's a whole list there. The list is not really that important because the list is including but not limited to. Effectively, if you are advertising a sports supplement as a sports supplement, you're going to be captured by this declaration if and only if you also satisfy one of two things. The first is that you include a specific ingredient. The second is that you are in a capsule or a tablet form. So let's just flesh this out a little bit so we know exactly which products are going to be captured by this declaration and classified as therapeutic goods. So if you advertise as a sports supplement and we're going to pull into the declaration at this point, contain or are represented expressly or by implication to contain one or more of the following substances. The first is a substance included in a schedule to the current poison standard, which is a poison standard is really made by the TGA, and it kind of says we've got these different schedules. These are the different ingredients in these schedules. Certain schedules are prescription only. Certain schedules are completely illegal depending on which schedule it falls into. If you contain an ingredient or a substance included in any of those schedules to the poison standard, you are now classified as a therapeutic good, not as a sports supplement. Or if you contain a substance expressly identified on the prohibited list. Now, this prohibited list, guys, is the World Anti-Doping Authority prohibited list. This is the WADA prohibited list. So if you contain a substance expressly identified on that list as an ingredient in this product that's being marketed as a sports supplement, you are now automatically declared to be a therapeutic good. Or if you contain a relevant substance that is added to an ingredient. Now, we know the relevant substances in this declaration were declared to be dendrobium and methylliberine, also known as dynamine. So if you contain dendrobium or methylliberine, automatically your sports supplement is now a therapeutic good. So that's the first really capturing of sports supplements. So products that are marketed as sports supplements contain an ingredient in a schedule to the poison standard, contain any ingredient on the WADA prohibited list, contain dendrobium or dynamine or any ingredient that acts similar to any of those ingredients, you are now declared a therapeutic good. The other area that this declaration captures is any sports supplement that is marketed as a sports supplement that is in a capsule, a tablet, or a pill form. As of the 30th of November 2023, so in a few years' time, all of those sports supplements are now also declared as therapeutic goods. So the first part of this declaration comes into effect in about 2 weeks from the recording of this video, the 30th of November 2020. Any product that's advertised as a sports supplement and contains any of those ingredients that we've just discussed is now a therapeutic good. In 3 years' time, 30th of November 2023, regardless of if you contain any of those ingredients or not, if you are advertised, marketed as a sports supplement, and you are in a pill, capsule, or tablet form, you are now classified as a therapeutic good. So there are some peculiarities around the way this declaration and this amendment has been drafted. The first one, and probably the most concerning one, is its reliance on the prohibited list from the World Anti-Doping Authority. Effectively, what this amendment does is it gives the World Anti-Doping Authority the authority to declare which ingredients make sports supplements automatically classified as therapeutic goods. So for example, and this is why this is so concerning, if WADA decide that caffeine is going to be on their prohibited list, then every sports supplement that contains caffeine, by nature of that decision on WADA's behalf, will now be automatically classified as a therapeutic good under the Therapeutic Goods Act because of the effect of this declaration and because of the effect of these amendments. So really, it's almost like the TGA is kind of handballing the authority to decide what is and is not therapeutic over to WADA, which is a completely independent authority that really should not have jurisdiction, in my personal opinion, over which sports supplements are and are not classified as therapeutic goods in Australia. The second peculiarity is this relevant substance that the TGA has brought in with this amendment. And the relevant substances have been declared in this declaration as being dendrobium and methylliberine, also known as dynamine. I guess the can of worms that kind of opens up is, does this now set the precedent for the TGA deciding what these relevant substances are at any point in time when they really just decide, you know what, we don't like this particular ingredient for whatever reason, and we can argue the reasons that the TGA have for banning certain substances, scheduling certain substances, declaring certain substances to be relevant ingredients until the cows come home. That's not what this video is about. This video and this particular point of concern is that if this does set the precedent for the TGA having the authority to decide on their own back with really no evidence that a particular ingredient is not good for public health and safety, then are they able to declare that as a relevant ingredient? And now does every sports supplement that contains that relevant ingredient get pulled into being a therapeutic good by the action of this declaration and in any future declarations and by the action of these amendments on the Therapeutic Goods Act? So once a product is declared as being a therapeutic good, what's the big deal? What does it matter if it's declared as being therapeutic good, declared as being a food, declared as being a complementary medicine? What's the big deal here? This is the question that a lot of people have been scratching their heads about. Why is this such a big deal? Quite simply, as soon as a product is classified as a therapeutic good, it falls under the jurisdiction of the Therapeutic Goods Administration via the Therapeutic Goods Act. Now, this administration has set up a regulatory framework that is extremely strict and extremely rigid and has the effect of really specifying what ingredients are allowed to be used, or what we call permissible ingredients, and the dosages that those ingredients are allowed to be used in. The net effect of this, and I'll give you an example, guys. I'm going to use caffeine, but before I get there, the practical effect of this is it takes a lot of the creativity out of the supplement industry. We can't use novel ingredients anymore because they're not permissible ingredients under the Therapeutic Goods Act. Or we can't use big dosages of certain ingredients that we know are quote unquote clinical doses that are going to deliver the desired effect because the Therapeutic Goods Administration hasn't allowed us to use that much of this particular ingredient. So let me dive into caffeine just as an example for you guys. So caffeine is included in Schedule 6 of the poisons standard, except when, and there's a bunch of different exceptions here, but I'm just going to focus on one. Caffeine, except when it's in preparations with a concentration of less than 5% caffeine. So if you include a sports supplement, let's say a fat burner or a pre-workout, that has less than 5% total caffeine in that product, or in that, let's just take per serve, for example. So let's say that a serve is a 10 gram serve and it has less than 500 milligrams of caffeine in that 10 gram serve. That is less than 5% caffeine. Therefore, that amount of caffeine doesn't fall in the Schedule 6 of the poison standard, which therefore makes that product not declared a therapeutic good. However, if we were to include in that same 10 gram scoop of that product 550 milligrams of caffeine, so now we're above 5%, we're 5.5%, it then gets captured by caffeine in Schedule 6 of the poison standard, is declared to be a therapeutic good under this declaration, under these amendments to the Therapeutic Goods Act. And then the Therapeutic Goods Permissible Ingredients Determination comes into play and actually says you can't have more than 1% caffeine in this therapeutic good because you initially had more than 5% caffeine. So by not being declared a therapeutic good, you can have up to 5% caffeine. As soon as you are declared a therapeutic good, that 5% caffeine limit now comes down to 1% caffeine. That's just an example of the risks associated with certain supplements being captured by this declaration and by these amendments and being declared to be therapeutic goods. Is now there's certain ingredients we just can't use because they're not permissible ingredients. And the ingredients we can use, we can't use the dosages that we want to use. 1% caffeine in a 10 gram scoop is 100 milligrams of caffeine. That's going to wipe out most pre-workouts, most fat burners, most nootropics on the market by virtue of them being declared therapeutic goods. So this is where it becomes quite strange and quite convoluted in the way that this declaration works practically, and once it captures certain products, the way that the permissible ingredients and the permissible dosages under the jurisdiction of the Therapeutic Goods Administration practically affect what we can and can't do with sports supplements. So we know in the short term, in about 2 weeks' time, the 30th of November 2020, pretty much every product that contains dendrobium, that contains methylliberine, aka dynamine, contains any ingredient listed in the WADA prohibited list or any ingredient included in any schedule to the poison standard is going to be taken from the market. You won't be able to purchase the product, you can't distribute the product products will no longer be available from the 30th of November 2020. That is the immediate effect. We then know that we've got a 3-year period before all of the sports supplements that are in capsule, pill, or tablet form are declared to be therapeutic. Once they're declared as therapeutic, most of them are not going to be able to meet the permissible ingredients or the permissible dosages regulations under the Therapeutic Goods Administration jurisdiction. So a lot of those products in this 3-year period are going to move to powder form. So that by the time the 30th of November 2023 comes along, they're no longer in a capsule, tablet, or pill form. They're no longer captured by this declaration and the amendments to the Therapeutic Goods Act and are not declared to be therapeutic goods and can continue being sold as powdered form sports supplements. So when we consider what effect this declaration and these amendments are going to have in the long term, this is really my personal opinion on how I kind of see this playing out. We know in the short term, products that contain these ingredients will just be taken off the market, not really that big a deal. Products that are currently in capsule, tablet, or pill form, move to powders, not that big a deal. We've got 3 years to do it. What I'm really concerned about is the intention of this declaration and the intention of these amendments is to increase regulation of sports supplements in Australia for the health and safety of the end consumer. That's why the TGA have done this. That's why Minister Greg Hunt ordered the initial consultation period and the initial investigation into the sports supplement industry in Australia. That was always the intention. My personal opinion on this, guys, I am of the opinion that we do need better regulation of sports supplements in this country. The reason why I'm of that opinion is that when the Therapeutic Goods Administration was established many, many decades ago, it was established to regulate primarily pharmaceutical drugs. That's what the TGA was designed to do. We then had food standards set up. Food Standards Australia, New Zealand, also known as FSANZ, set up to regulate foods. Once again, many, many decades ago. In fact, the Food Standards Code really hasn't been touched much in the last almost 30 years. So you go back many, many decades and you kind of go, at that point in time, we've got foods, okay, cool, they're regulated by FSANZ. Over here, we've got pharmaceutical drugs, they're regulated by the TGA. At that point in time, sports supplements didn't really exist. And we now know that sports supplements sit in this gray area, this void that is created by having a regulatory body for governing pharmaceutical drugs and then having a regulatory institution that is responsible for governing foods. Sports supplements kind of fit in the middle of it. They're not completely foods. They're not completely pharmaceutical drugs or complementary medicines. They're kind of in the middle. And by nature of that, there's no regulatory body responsible for regulating sports supplements. So my personal opinion is that yes, we do need some sort of regulatory body, some sort of regulatory structure that is primarily concerned with guaranteeing the health and safety of the public when they are purchasing and consuming sports supplements. The problem with these amendments and this declaration is the industry is going to pivot. The industry is going to pivot so that they are not declared to be therapeutic goods because there's too much regulation when it comes to what the Therapeutic Goods Administration is supposed to do, which is regulate pharmaceutical drugs. It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't apply to sports supplements. It's never going to work. So the industry is going to pivot, and the industry is going to dump a lot more on FSANZ's plate because now we're going to push towards, yes, we are going down this scale of, yeah, we are foods, 100% we are foods. FSANZ is not set up to regulate sports supplements. They don't have the enforcement power. They don't have regulatory structure that makes any sense outside of regulating foods. They do regulation of foods spectacularly. Sports supplements do not, once again, it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Sports supplements do not fit in to traditional food regulation. It just doesn't work. So the long-term effect, in my personal opinion, is that the regulation of sports supplement is going to be dumped on FSANZ's plate. FSANZ is nowhere near in a position to regulate the sports supplement industry. And although the initial intention of this declaration and these amendments was to increase the regulation of sports supplements in Australia, the effect that it's going to have is actually decrease the regulation of sports supplements in Australia. I feel like that's how it's going to play out, and I think it's going to be a huge shame because this process has been in play for so many years now, and I just think that considering the practical effect of the declaration and the amendments as they were being worked through, as the consultation periods were happening, as the Therapeutic Goods Administration and the federal government was getting feedback from stakeholders, getting feedback from people in the industry that can see this happening, there could have been steps taken to avoid what is effectively going to be the deregulation of sports supplements in Australia. And that's it. That's my personal interpretation of how I read the declaration and these amendments to the Therapeutic Goods Act, and my personal opinions on which supplements are going to be affected, how this is going to play out in the short term and long term. I'm interested to get some discussion happening with you guys. What do you think about my interpretation of these amendments? Do you think it's correct? Do you disagree? Do you have a different interpretation? Do you agree with what I think is going to happen in the short term, how I think it's going to play out in the long term? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, guys. I'm really interested to get some conversation happening down below in the comments box on the YouTube channel, and I'm going to dive in there myself and get amongst the conversation. Let's see what we can come up with when it comes to the future regulation of sports supplements in Australia.